try to do is look at how individual stories of these particular men reflect larger concerns and issues in the black community, and how those issues in the black community tie into larger American themes. Heroin hit the black community, but it was a national disaster. Crack hit the black community, but it was a national disaster. It involved international trafficking in both cases. It involved government corruption in both cases. It involved greed and the kind of voracious capitalism which sometimes is notable in this country. So I feel like the show starts with these individuals and then paints a really much broader picture of the country and of the cities that these men are based out of. So that's what we try and do. The same thing appeals to all Americans about crime. We like crime stories. I love The Godfather. I love Chinatown. I love The Wire. And this is an opportunity to look at crime in America and to do it in a way that hasn't been done before. Quite honestly, you couldn't have done this show anywhere else. Only BET could have really done a show about black criminals and gotten away with it. And the only way you can do a show about black criminals is to look at why these criminals exist, the social context of that, their impact on the black community, and the impact on the cities that they were based out of. So it was a great opportunity to tell amazing stories and to look at how crime on so many different levels reflects America's values. We only deal with cold cases. That's the number one rule of the show. The case is done. We don't deal with anybody who's appealing. You know, we try and deal solely with people who've been incarcerated and have been incarcerated for a while and they're not appealing and it's done, or they're passed and deceased, or they're out of jail and their cases are over. Don't deal with any pending new cases. There's three levels to trying to do this show. There's actually trying to get the subject to cooperate, which in the case of Frank Lucas, in the case of Melvin Williams, we were able to do. But some of these guys are dead. A great many of them have passed, such as Felix Mitchell. So then you have to try and get their families to see if they're interested in cooperating. In some cases, some of the family members, people don't know that they may have a brother or a father or an ex-husband who's been involved in crime. Sometimes it's delicate because they don't want their friends to know that aspect of their life. And then you also have to try and get the criminal justice system to cooperate. Police, prosecutors, FBI, etc., who often are concerned that we're going to glorify the criminals that they arrested. It's a difficult show to put together because there's a lot of different elements that have to cooperate for it to happen. Depends on the show. I don't think you can make a blanket statement. I love The Wire. And The Wire made it really clear, without being preachy, that there's no retirement fund, there's no IRA, there's no going down to Florida to your retirement home for the most part, for most of these guys who get really deeply involved in it at the highest levels. That long-term jail sentences or death is really the road you go on when you really, really go after it at that level. So The Wire did that well. Hopefully we're doing that in our show. Over and over again, these stories all have a similar arc, and they always end up in a bad place for the most part. I mean, there's almost no really happy guys at the end of this. Some find a form of contentment, spiritual contentment, or satisfaction with the life that they build after they get out. And some of them find a sense of contentment or a sense of peace with themselves while they're in jail. But it's all very bittersweet. Well, I've done my whole career doing all kinds of stuff. I did a movie about HIV in the black community for HBO last year. I've written books on everything from basketball to hip-hop. And black crime is an important part of the black community as any of those things. When you look at the level of incarceration, when you look at the level of dropouts, when you look at addiction, even you look at HIV, a lot of it is connected to crime since a great many people get infected, in fact the majority through intravenous drug use, which involves heroin mostly. So I don't see how looking at how crime grows in our community, at the impact of black criminals on black people, is not a valuable thing. So, I mean, that's why I wanted to do the show. And obviously, people are interested in crime. And that's why it's a big part of America. America is the most violent country in the world. We have more guns per individual than any other country in the world. Black people are part of America. We are victims and reflectors of that, and we are predators on our own people. And so I think that's what the show's about. That was a big conversation we had about whether or not we should do them. And we ultimately did them because two things. One is we felt the story of the DC Sniper hadn't been told from a black point of view. And that is to say that there's stuff in our show that didn't come out very much prominently in some of the other, like the CNN. The family cooperated with us a great deal. The wife of Mr. Muhammad and some of the family members. We just thought it was an amazing story, and quite honestly, that show that we did on DC Sniper could have been a 2.5-hour piece. There's a lot about that case that's very mysterious, and about Muhammad's background is very mysterious. And we hinted some of that in the piece. How he got to be who he was and how he was trained to do what he did. It's very, very interesting, and I think there's a lot more investigation. All of them say the remorse thing, especially after they've got out of jail for a while or they're really out of the game. But the level at which they believe it is the varies man to man. There are some people who are actively out there working with young people, trying to use their experience to keep young people out of the criminal life. They made it their life mission to do that. And there are others who aren't. They loved what they did. They love their lifestyle. They love the notoriety. And they're still not comfortable being ordinary citizen, and they do their best they can to be ordinary citizens, but there's so much invested in that criminal lifestyle that they find it hard to escape it. So it varies from man to man. There's no blanket statement, but they all, if you ask them point blank, they all say that they're remorseful for what they did. Absolutely. But the more you talk to them, how deep that remorse goes, it varies from person to person. There is a lot to that. Obviously, when you get older, you have to reflect on the pain you've inflicted on people and the damage you've done to the black community to a great degree. But also some of it is mitigated by the fact a lot of them were living a very high life. They had lots of money, they had lots of power, they had lots of women. And there's nostalgia, lots and lots of nostalgia for who they used to be. And so, it's like a contradictory thing. On one hand, they know they did wrong. They know they hurt literally thousands of people, depending on how big the operation was. At the same time, they were ballers, and now they're not. So that's the contradiction they're dealing with. He lives in the New York area. He lives very modestly. That money's way long gone. And he's not lived a very high life. Obviously, he made money for his rights to the movie, and I'm sure there's certain royalties that'll come in. But it's not a very glamorous life. It's a tough life. He's got money, but he's around. The movie generated a certain kind of energy around him, which made him uncomfortable. But he walks in, he's out here living his life on a day-to-day basis. Whether he's living in fear or not, I can't really speak for the man. We dealt with him, we got his phone number, we talked to him, we met him a number of times, and he's around. So what can I say? We really would like to do Bumpy. The problem is there's about 3 photographs, for even the ones that she has. She doesn't have very many. There's also very few people alive now, aside from her, and she's very, very, she's very elderly, who can speak firsthand about him. Everything would be kind of secondhand. That's one I've always wanted to do, but it seems like it's going to be very difficult to do it on our show. What's really sad and painful when you do these shows is not the men themselves who, in my respect, I think a man makes his decisions and he lives by his decisions. What's really painful are the sons, the daughters, the wives, whose lives are affected by the decisions that were out of their control and live in a great degree of fear at many times in their life, have their parents be subjects of ridicule or conversation in the media. That's where the pain, that's where the discomfort comes from. So many times you're dealing with the wives or the sons and daughters of guys who either they barely know, who've been in jail for 20, 30 years in some of these cases, or had their lives taken away from them. That's the stuff that's sad. And most of the shows, there's a wife, a daughter, a son, or sons talking about their father. It really gets you. America is not a new gangster. America has always been a country built on the gun. That's how the Europeans came here and took over the whole country. So I don't really think they're new gangsters. I think America's always been intricately involved in taking what it needed to take to survive.